Hey, Stoney here with another game of Mechabellum. And this is going to be an over-explained game specifically on what happens when you are in a headbutt situation with your opponent. Let's go. At the bottom here, I am playing as a quick supply specialist with sledgehammers and crawlers. And my opponent is playing as a fire badger specialist with tarantulas and fangs. Now, I really like the crawler sledgehammer combination more so than the fangs with sledgehammers, and that is simply because with the crawlers I get to play around with target priority. Depends on what your opponent has on his board. You have to initially predict if he's going to go with marksman, right? And if there's a chance of going marksman, you do want to have at least one squad of your crawler at the front. But if you don't expect your opponent to go marksman, or there's not very likely to be marksman, like for example, if he has like this sort of tarantula setup with fangs, there is a 50-50 chance that he doesn't go marksman and simply just go with more tarantula because he noticed that your sledgehammers may not have the DPS. In that case, I would prefer to have at least some of my crawlers behind the sledgehammers. And the reason for that is, I want the tarantulas to start focusing on the sledgehammers so that they will waste their time trying to bring them down while my crawlers can close in the distance. So that just gives me more value with the crawler. You cannot do this with fans because the fans don't move fast enough. So if your opponent has like tarantulas, having fans behind, they actually walk very slowly. So with fans, I always just like to do what my opponent does, just having fans at the front vertically so that they tank a few more shots, and they also move with the army. Alright, my opponent decided to take a extra tarantula in round 1. It is a viable strategy. It allows you to have better chaff clear because I did have 3 squads of crawlers. I could easily just go with 2 more crawlers instead of the third pack of tanks. So having 3 tarantula makes sense in the context of things. However, 3 tarantulas does not beat 3 sledgehammers. Round 2, we have a unit drop. So whenever you're looking at the unit drop, there's a few things to consider. The first thing to consider is the dynamic between the units that's being offered in the drop. Sometimes you might be offered a wasp, maybe, for example, this pack is wasp, level 3 fangs, and steel balls, for example, right? And then of course mustangs. In that case, you know mustangs are really good into wasp. You know mustangs are really good into level 3 fangs. Not very good into steel balls, but then steel balls are kind of situational, whereas mustangs are just a great generalist unit. So in that case, you might want to choose Mustang over the other options unless you have a very specific plan. So the first idea is just to look at the units that's being offered in the unit cards and notice which one counters the most of other units. The second point is to look at the board and see what your opponent has and what you have, and make a prediction on what your opponent may potentially pick. So in this case, the Scorpion stands out for me for my opponent because I already have 4 packs of sledgehammers. Having a Scorpion not only unlocks the unit, it will be very effective against my sledgehammers because they are kind of close and they're on the line, and I have to rely mostly on crawlers streaming through in order to protect myself against the Scorpions. So I know my opponent is going to pick the Scorpions, and the Scorpion also pretty much counters every single other units in this unit pack. So for me, I need to make a decision that will improve my side of the board. So in this case, I know my opponent's going to go Scorpions, which means I probably am not going to go too heavy into tanks because this is a round 2 Scorpion, so that's a pretty hard counter. What I do want to go, maybe either go into Melting Point, or I can go into Hackers because my opponent has these large high HP single units with not a lot of range right here on the line, and he's also putting down Fire Badgers. So having Hackers right here behind the tanks could actually be very, very difficult to deal with. And what does the hacker composition need? It needs a lot of chaff clear. So both the Mustangs and Arclights are interesting choices. When it comes to chaff clear, especially for Arclights, you really don't need to level them. Level 1 Arclights, they do just fine, unless your opponent starts stacking level 2 crawlers. But my opponent is a Fire Badger specialist, so there's really not a lot of reason for him to do that. All right, so let's see what choices we make. So my opponent took the Scorpion, right? Makes sense, wants to go with the tanks. I took the Arclight because it's one of those units that not necessarily work well against the Scorpion, but later on, if I do want to go with hackers or melting points, Arclights with the additional chaff clear could be very helpful. And it doesn't hurt to have 3 deployments in this round, plus the 2 more units I get to buy, so I just end up having a lot more units than my opponent. All right, knowing there's going to be a Scorpion somewhere, and also knowing with a sledge line like this, in round 2, you might be susceptible to a cheeky sentry missile. I needed to put down additional chaff right here at the front. I chose the fans instead of the crawlers because later on I can have the option of getting fan shield. Units that are on the line with shield are actually extremely significantly better than ones without. In the later rounds, your opponents are more than likely to want to missile your initial pack of chaff so that the units can target into your carry units sooner. If I have crawlers here, there will be no way to defend in the later rounds. Yes, fans are a little bit weak when it comes to just overall HP, right? They have less unit models and each model are just weaker. But because of their potential shield technology in the later rounds, I leave them here because I want to use the shield down the road. All right, the battle is going pretty well for my opponent. He spent 2 sentry missiles to get rid of my initial fans, allowing the Scorpions to have an easier time to target. Also, a flank coming in from the side. I had a flank on the Arclight here. I was trying to distract that pack of fans, but it's not going to change the outcome of this round. All right, round 3. We're looking at the reinforcement cards. Let's take a quick look. I know I chose deployment. Let's take a look at the options. If I were my opponent, I probably would go for the Nano Repair Kit. Nano Repair Kit is just excellent on these large units, and it makes them very difficult to kill. I don't have enough damage output. I only have sledgehammers, so that's something to be expected from my opponent because it's just clearly a very good card in this situation. If my opponent takes the Nano Kit, I have to answer in 2 ways. The first way is to out DPS whatever they're shooting, so melting point is still on the table. The second way is to bypass the generation. So for example, hackers, who doesn't really care if you're generating health, and put that on the board. So since I was already planning on having some sort of a hacker play since the last unit drop, I think this still works for me. Looking at the other cards, Rhino Assault is good tempo for my opponent, and that needs to be respected. So whenever your reinforcement card consists of things like Rhino Assault or Underground Crawlers or Wasps, you just need to make sure that you at least respect that kind of play. So I know in this round, at least I need to put something here to deal with these crawlers, and maybe something here, not necessarily to kill the rhino, but hopefully stall in case there is going to be a rhino. For me, I wanted to, and then there's 2 other cards, right, for my opponent. Smart Marksman is not required. I think my opponent right now is going heavily into some sort of ground suppression with the Tarantulas and Scorpion. If he ever needs air, I think Mustangs probably works a little better unless I'm going heavily into boats, which can happen. But in which case, Smart Marksman is not an excellent card here. Redeployment is one of those skill check cards that you see a lot of at higher MMRs. I love redeployment. I picked redeployment simply because there are no real other cards that really work for me. Nano doesn't quite work because I have medium-sized units, so nothing can really benefit from it that much. Rhino Assault was interesting, but I fully expect my opponent to try to defend. He already has fangs here and crawlers on the other side, so the real good spot I can drop in is in the middle, but I wouldn't be surprised if he puts 2 more sets of crawler. It just makes good general sense just having crawlers behind the tower. So redeployment is going to be my pick. All right, let's start the round and see what my opponent does. All right, so I took Mech Rage on the tanks. I needed to have stronger chaff clear, and since we're headbutting, don't really need range whatsoever. My opponent did decide to take the Nano Repair Kit. It's a good chance that's going to put it on this Tarantula because that's the one that got leveled. There it is. And I used the redeployment. So the first thing I used for the redeployment is to move this crawler from the front all the way to the back. Now you might wonder, okay, why do you just move a single chaff unit? Well, remember earlier when we talked about the Rhino drop? So a Rhino drop would require me to buy some unit here. So that's one deployment, right? What if I don't have to buy an extra unit, but instead I would just have it stalled or have it moved away from somewhere? And this is what I did. So I took the crawlers away from the middle board and I put it onto this side. I still have my Tarantula on the other side. Because this is round 3 and I took Mech Rage, I don't have a lot of money. So that's the best I could do because I didn't have a lot of money. This allows me to protect at least on this side. So in case there is a Rhino drop coming in, these crawlers and Arclight should at least bring it down to very low, if not outright killing them. The Rhino is probably going to drop like in front of the crawlers, right? So that's how this side would defend. On the other side, unfortunately, I wasn't able to defend against that, but I do expect the Rhino drop to either happen here or in the center. Why here? Because he already has chaff here. So if I drop a Rhino right in front of these crawlers, Arclight would just shoot the Rhino and then the crawlers would just follow. So to me, if I'm my opponent, this is where I would drop the Rhino. All right. Oh yeah, and the last point, why did I move that crawler? Well, because in case my opponent did decide to sell out of this crawler, I just have some additional late arriving crawler. So that crawler is serving a purpose no matter where they are. All right, so here we can see the Scorpion really start to do work, and the Tarantula are just a superior chaff clear compared to my Sledgehammers, even with Mech Rage. I think Mech Rage brings the Sledgies very close to the sort of a chaff clearing power of a Tarantula, but you know, it's expensive, and that makes, you know, taking the second tech even more so expensive. All right, we're looking at round 4. Anti-interference module. So there was a couple cards, and it was just going a little quickly because the game sets up. We had quick drop, which allows you to teleport faster in the flanks. We have anti-interference module. We have elite hackers, and I think we have improved wraith. My opponent was actually very heads up by picking up the anti-interference module. I think he took it because he saw the elite hacker card and he recognizes that hacker may actually be decent into his board. And he will be right. Hacker is a great option into his board. Pick up the anti-interference module. For me, I was very tempted at taking the elite hacker, but at level 3, at 400 supplies apiece, that's just a little too much for me. I mean, we're looking at level 2 tarantulas, level 1, right? Level 1 scorpions, maybe it gets another level here. Neither of this really calls for a level 3 hacker. I think a level 1 hacker would do just fine onto these units. We'll have plenty of time to steal them. And also it just gives me more options to have more of these hackers. So didn't take the level 3 hacker. My opponent is holding on to the interference module, anti-interference module. I think he's planning on putting on something bigger than the tarantula, because you can put on a tarantula, but ideally you want to put on a unit that this hacker is going to spend a lot of time locking onto, because they would do absolutely nothing but to waste time. All right. I moved my arc light on the top right over to the bottom left. So why do I have my arc light here on the line of the tower? Well, right now we're both sort of headbutting in the center. I need a way to at least have some type of security in this box here. By having it on the tower, or even slightly one square below the tower, if your opponent decides to put down a pack of crawlers, these arc lights will run towards the crawler instead of running forward. Later on, I can supplement this defense position with more Mustangs, or maybe with marksmen, to make them even stronger, so they can protect both in air and also on the ground. All right, looking at the front here. Now, when you're looking at a board and you're trying to figure out, do I need to add more chaff, and where do I need to add more chaff? One great way is just to see when does the first shot land on your carry unit. And then you pick the final chaff unit and you put something further behind that one. Now, what if your final chaff unit is already on the wall? Well, you pick that same chaff unit if it is a crawler, and then you put a fang right next to it. So it's not always an exact science. Sometimes you have to kind of play around with it, but the general rule, so for example, your last pack of crawler is like somewhere in this area, right? If you put your fangs directly on top of it, right? So in vertical position, so let's say your crawler's right here, your fangs right here. These fangs will arrive approximately at this location after your crawlers, right? So that's one way to do it. Otherwise, you just put crawlers further down. So that's how you can build a very long stream of chaff. And the reason I use that method is because, well, the purpose of the chaff is so that your carry units won't take damage. So by looking at when they start to take the first shot of damage, you will identify where the broken link is. All right, we got another unit drop here. And again, following the same rule, this one was a little too quick. It just makes sense for me with the triple marksman. But following the same rule I was talking earlier, first let's look at counters, okay? Is there a unit that counters all the other units on this board? Here is not quite, right? There's some counters, but it's really not direct counter to anything. Your marksman can get anti-air and it will counter the Phoenix really well. Melting Point can potentially counter with range Sabertooth, but all of this, it requires some sort of support or additional investment. So in that case, you're free to choose whatever you want. Now, the single unit options allows you to sell that unit and get a lot of cash, and you can reinvest into whatever composition you're already into. And you got 3 of these options, so you can probably just pick the one that you might use later on and then sell the unit. Now keep in mind, in the calculation of this, cost for this unit, unlock cost is considered. So if you're not really planning on using Melting Point down the road, and Melting Point costs 200 to unlock, maybe get the Sabertooth, which only costs 100 to unlock. Actually, I think Sabertooth only cost 50. Actually, you know what? What am I saying? Sabertooth is a rare unit. You cannot unlock it, but if they were to be unlocked, it's around 50. So it's the same as the Sledgehammer. You probably get more value out of Sabertooth. That's why you hear the term Saber Cash, because it's just a good unit to sell. And you can also keep it, right? If you keep the Sabertooth, put like field maintenance on it, they become very difficult to kill until your opponent gets a Melting Point. It's just a lot of firepower. All right. The second rule is to look at the board and predict what your opponent may get and what you want to get. Now, for me, level 3 marksman makes a ton of sense because not only level 3 marksmen are decent against all the other units, these are just heavy, tanky, long-range units. Having 3 marksmen allows me to have multiple angles to deal with his medium-sized unit. Because sometimes I don't really want your Fire Badgers. I don't want to hack them, I just want to pop them off. Fire Badgers are too good at frontline chaff clear, so if I can have stuff to pop you off, the better. Alright, let's get going. The snipers could also be very good for my opponent as well. He's already heavily into anti-ground with the Scorpions, which means the only hole in his composition is anti-large units in the air. So he decided to take the level 2 melting point, which also serves the role of anti-large units in the air. The reason I said it's anti-large unit in the air is because I have mech rage sledges, and a very common composition is just sledge boat, right? You take boats, range, and overload, and then you just keep popping down tanks. Your opponent will probably take a long time to kill the tanks if he doesn't already have Scorpions, and then your boat will kill everything else on this board. But because he's already got Scorpions since round 2, I'm not really planning on using sledges to prop up my boats, but instead I'm going to hackers. And last round he's already seen the hackers, so he knows this is what's happening. So the reason he picked the level 2 melting point is so that he can use the anti-interference module. So melting point on the line, I mean, he doesn't have assault melter, but even regular melter at level 2 on the line with energy absorption can do a huge amount of damage. I think what my opponent will eventually move into is multi-hacker, or not multi-hacker, multi-melter with energy absorption. I have a ton of medium units, each with a lot of HP, so you can convert a lot of HP from just the front line. All right, flank is still coming in, no problem. The melter is still here. My chap line is still good. My hacker started to work on these big tarantulas. And of course, level 3 marksmen are starting to work on this level 2 melting point, so they're actually pretty good. Got the tarantula level 2 with the item. That could be very annoying. All right, hacker was able to pop that tarantula, pop that melting point. Marksman, what am I saying? Marksman was able to kill that melting point. Hacker are still working on the chaff line here. It's a little unfortunate I do not have range. If I had range, I would have been able to steal the Scorpion, but I didn't have range. So this round still goes to my opponent. All right, round 6. And again, I choose these things very quickly because I know exactly what I want. It just comes with practice. But let's break it down a little bit more. Improved rate is offered again. I think it's a sign from Bearlike that says, get the improved rate. They're so good at chaff clear. The reason I didn't want to get to rate is because my opponent he already has melting point on the line. So having a rate is just not the greatest of ideas. Okay, so all of these 4 options, for me personally, improved fire control on a hacker is just too good to ignore, right? Anything that shoots very fast benefits the most from these attack upgrades, because the things that shoot slow, we're mostly just looking at breakpoints, right? If you can kill a unit in 2 shots instead of 3 shots by taking a damage item, you want to do that. But if you're killing that same unit in the same number of shots with 10% more damage, or 40% more damage, whatever, it doesn't make sense, right? Because yes, you may on paper say you now have 40% more damage, but when you are facing off with things like the mounting point or even the fire badger, if you kill them in the same number of shots, it makes no point. So I'm having these on a hacker. Shield drop is pretty good too. Advanced offensive tactic, I think this one is mostly a bait. You can get the same value directly from the tower upgrade, and you can use that anytime you want. The only exception is when you're running things like Fan Carry or Mustang Carry, where attack is just that good. you might want to take that and you might want to take tower. So, but in this case, that's not useful for me. For my opponent, I think shield airdrop is the best. He could also take improved firepower control. If he wants to use his melter as just a big magnet at the front with energy absorption, having more firepower is always better. But I think shield drop is the best for him. Because shield drop is offered, I need to make sure that I have enough shield breaks. So these Mustangs, the stone collars are going to be great into breaking those shields. I also wanted to add shield of my own. It was a very tough call between, do I get shield this turn or do I get range this turn? Last term, I didn't really have the range in the end to get to the scorpions. So really didn't have the opportunity to win. But I think shield just goes a little bit further. Shield at the hacker is 20,000 per level. So right now, all of these have 40,000 HP shields. That's going to help them survive at least 2, if not, well, this is about almost 4 shots from a scorpion, but his shields will be targeted by the melting point earlier on. So I think shield is a much better value here. And also, if I can convert more units during our fight instead of having to do it at the end, I'll win anyways. So I think shield is going to be the better choice. For my opponent, he took the multi-melter. I think he's definitely setting up with multi-melter and energy absorption, and that's to be expected. I mean, he's got the melters in a very forward position, so you know these melters aren't going to be sniping giants anytime soon. I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be another reinforcement drop for like a heavy armor or even a super heavy armor. That just makes these melters very difficult to deal with. The danger of having a very tech-focused unit at the front is that your opponent can always just get EM. All right, more melters being added. I noticed there was a gap here where the Fire Badger was just kind of on its own. So I wanted to have more options to hack. And also, now that I have shield, every hacker that I buy is an additional at least 20,000 HP. So I think it's definitely worth the 200 supply cost for like 20,000 HP shield that respawns every year. Round. All right. Lots of upgrades here, leveling. All right, again, let's look at the chat line. I feel like for new players, a very big issue is they do not know how to put late arriving chaps. So immediately I noticed a huge problem on my board. This pack of sledgehammers died way too fast. Now, how did they die? Well, because of the existence of multi-melter, and they always, like, I think the lock-on is almost instant. Like, as long as they're kind of turned towards it, they can just get their beams latch onto the units. The reason this multi-melter lock onto this sledgy so early is because he used 2 missiles at the front to get rid of my 2 fangs, and my crawler, they're just a little bit too slow. So as soon as those fangs die, the multi-melter was able to lock onto this tank. And I really need to solve that issue. So there's 2 ways to solve that issue. One way is just to add a pack of crawlers in vertical setup, like what we had in the beginning. And then the second way to deal with it is to get fan shield. All right, a huge round here. Ooh, getting that scorpion just in the nick of time. But still, though, it's going to be a pretty big round here for my opponent. Unless I got a great tower timing, which means my hacker can go to work. Kind of. Kind of. Oh my goodness. Hacker's getting it done. Or rather, my opponent's scorpion getting it done. One thing to note is that even though you hack your opponent's scorpion, any experience gained on that unit still belongs to your opponent. So just keep that in mind. We got unit cards here. None of this is particularly useful. I mean, offensive tactic is offered again, and I mentioned earlier why this is not always great. I could take it because I'm running hackers, and they do benefit hackers tremendously, but it's such an expensive card for just a few units. Portable shield is interesting. You can put it on a hacker or even sledgehammers. They will survive one extra shot from the scorpion, and that's actually pretty big. Quick teleport at this point is a little late. I mean, I guess I could put arc light and crawler here just to pull maybe a pack of crawler, and that's really I can pull. If he has crawlers behind the tower, I have more incentive to do so. I pull even more crawlers, but just having one pack of crawler, I think that's a bit of a waste, so didn't want that. And tank production line, I don't have any giants, so there's really nothing this can benefit from. My opponent could probably take tank production line, but you have to be very careful because I'm running hackers and tanks are delicious targets for my hackers. The Harkalac on the left gets a level up, and now at round 7, I finally have enough money to get range. Range plus shield plus adequate chaff clear makes for one happy hacker comp. Hacker comp isn't as easy to set up as, let's say, like your Force Stang or your Sledge Boat or your Typhoon Boat, right? It's mostly like 2 unit combinations. With a hacker, they need to be babied. You need to have a strong front line so that they can tank the damage even with the help of shield. You need to have shield break in the form of stormcallers, and most importantly, you need to have chaff clear. In a ideal world, what I like to see with hackers is I take shielded fangs, I take stormcallers is almost required, and then I use mustangs. I'll make sure that if my hackers don't have range, my mustang won't have range as well, because I want my mustangs to stand in front of the hackers, and if I do take range, both of them take range at the same time, or hackers take range before the mustangs if I don't have enough supply to do so. So that way, the mustangs will always run in front of the hackers, provide chaff clear, but later on also providing chaff. All right, in this round, I added oil right there in the middle. I noticed that my opponents have a lot of fire badgers, so hopefully some of these crawlers will run it into oil and get it ignited. Better yet, I get to steal one of these fire badgers, and then I'll just ignite it myself. All right, chaff clear on the left-hand side is slightly lacking, but I am stealing this multi-melter, and that's causing a lot of problems for my opponent. This big melter, though, in the middle is now distracting 2 hackers. And being a level 2, soon to be level 3 melter, that's a bit of a problem, because that melter could potentially just grow out of control. Speaking of out of control, I mean, a huge round here for me. Multiple units stolen. Unit drop once again. And I do apologize. I pick these things very quickly, and sometimes it's not to my benefit. The Mustangs jump out at me. The Mustangs covers a few major weaknesses on my board. So the first weakness is I don't have any anti-air, right? The only anti-air I have are in the form of these 3 marksmen. So if my opponent wants to shut me down because these marksmen are doing a lot of work into this melting point, right? This marksman last round alone was like 80,000 damage. It was really good. He can just put down triple wasp and to tie my marksman up, right? Mustangs take care of that problem. Mustangs also at level 3 are pretty decent chaff clear into level 1 stuff. So if you take range, they'll take care of chaff clear problem as well. And then finally, Mustangs are also great chaff from my hackers, because even with range at 40, they get 135, whereas your hackers at 150. So your Mustangs will always stand in front for 15 meters. And what that means is that sometimes the Scorpion will shoot at the Mustang, but it will not carry over to the hacker. So Mustang is just a very decent unit for all those purposes. For my opponent, I mean, Mustangs is also good against hackers because Mustangs shoot very fast. It has a lot of unit models, and if you can make them in front of the units, Hackers will just have to hack them one at a time, so it's really not efficient. But instead, my opponent decided to go with the Wraith. I think the Wraith is a decent choice as well. Wraith in a headbutt situation, especially with Degen Beam, here it is, makes it very painful for the headbutt. Because, one, you can't exactly kill the Wraith very quickly. I mean, they're tanky units. I do have beefy marksman, but I have a feeling that they're going to put chaff on the front here. The longer they have Degen being active, the more damage that they're going to do to your army. So the Degen being reduces movement speed by 40. So my chaff line are now weaker. They are reduced attack by 20, and then they take additional 30% damage. So it's a pretty significant debuff on my side of the army. Pick up Fan Shield and add even more fans. I noticed that the last round the missile was just way too effective, so I didn't want that to happen. Additional fans on the far left. We have the Mustang's position on the both sides, clearly slightly towards the top. But I think the better position, I think being at the top is great because you can start shooting at his fans right away. The better position is to put it vertically with part of the Mustangs on the line with tower, because there's always a possibility that your opponent just go like double wasp at the corner, knowing that you only have like a marksman to defend, and that can throw you around. And with both of our HP down to just under 1500, if you throw around, there's a good chance that you lose the game. So I didn't want to take that risk. Add my Mustangs vertically, so in case they are wasp, some of the Mustangs will turn and respond. Let's slow this down a little bit and let's talk about what's happening on this board. So the Degen being Wraith, as you can see, are doing so much damage, right? We're still, like, the Wraiths are still up. My marksmen are not getting onto target. Instead of they're shooting at this melting point. So not really great. Now, one thing about this Wraith though, just to keep in mind, Degen Beam has a radius of 120 meters. Once you take range on this Wraith, your Wraith shoots at 110 meters, which means unless your opponent's units have a very short range, they are probably going to be outside of your Degen radius. So that's sort of the trade-off that you have to make, right? Whenever you're taking Degen in this situation, look at your opponent's board. If the majority of their units shoots further than 120 meters, maybe don't take range on your Wraith. Force your Wraith to move into your opponent's army and apply Degen, because from the last round, he really did not get a lot of values from the Degen. I mean, I get the range, it just helps you a lot with chaff clear, but the Degen, if you're going to put your Wraith this far away, this is not going to help. All right, so as a bonus for the final round, let's take a look at how my opponent can play the final round a little bit more effectively. So let's take over to Orc Slayer and let's talk about what can he do. Okay, looking at the cards here, I think it's either probably going to be the Mustangs or the Rhino could be interesting. So a level 7 Rhino actually does decent damage if you, let's say, take Whirlwind into that corner. So maybe with a Rhino Blender into the tower, like right here, might be what we need. So let's see here. Let's get some Fire Badgers just to provide a little bit of chaff clear. Don't have a lot of money this round. Alright, so we're gonna do this. We'll probably try to lots of crawlers. Let's see. I do want to like ignite his units, but then it also puts my units in jeopardy. So a little bit of a tough call here. I think shields are pretty good. Is there anything I could sell? Let's sell this one because I really want to have level on this. And let's just take speed. And let's see what happens. Alright, Rhino getting in, doing the work. Trying to break the shield. Got it. Fire Badger's helping out. Okay. Big Rhino getting in. Can he get tower? Yes, he can get tower. Is that enough to support the cause here? Oh, these hackers, they're just doing so much. Got the tower, which is not great, but we still have a level 7 Rhino though. Might fall, but here's the level 3 melting point. Okay, the Rhino is fallen. The big melter though, with the energy absorption, still doing so much work. Oh, this is actually a decent round. 900, not enough to be lethal. I think I had like 1,000 something. But this is definitely a good round. So sometimes the most obvious answer may not be the best one. In this case, having a level 7 Rhino into level 1 or level 2 hackers is actually pretty good as long as you can clear a path for that Rhino, right? Now, next round, you're not going to be so lucky. So one way you can do, and this is going to be brutal, is to sell this melter and take the anti-interference module onto this Rhino and just let it work. Because unless your opponent gets like a melting point to specifically deal with the Rhino, he's going to do so much work in there. So have some options open, right? All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this over-explained video. If you have any comments or suggestions on how I can improve on this type of format, let me know in the comments. And if you're looking for another video, here's the one for you, and I will see you on the next one.
Prepare your tactics. Mechabellum's calling. Deploy your fortress. The battlefield's alive with swarms.